What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily, and in this video, we're going to be comparing the Samsung Galaxy A01 and the Samsung Galaxy A11. These are, of course, the cheapest devices in Samsung's A series lineup for 2020, and really the cheapest Samsung phones you can buy in general right now. For folks who just need a simple phone that can do the everyday stuff, these are likely the devices you'll be considering. And with both of these phones coming in at well under $200, they might just be the deal you're looking for. There are some pretty significant differences between these two phones though that might sway you one way or another. So in this video, I'm going to go over everything you need to know about the A01 and A11, and hopefully by the end, you'll be able to decide if either of these devices is right for you. So first off, let's actually talk about price, since I think that's likely the main reason someone would even consider these phones in the first place. The A01 is the absolute cheapest Samsung phone on the market right now, and it retails for around $100. It's available unlocked and through some carriers here in the US, and I suspect that later in the summer, with more retailers and carriers offering some service deals, it'll likely be even cheaper. The A11, as you might expect, is the next step up in the A series lineup, and this phone sells on Amazon right now for around $160. Its full retail price, technically, I believe is closer to $180, but again, with some network and carrier deals coming soon, the price will probably come down in the coming months. Either way you look at it though, the A11 is going to be $80 to $100 more than the A01. And while the dollar amount may not seem like much, I guess you sort of have to look at it really as being about twice as expensive, which in that case is a significant price jump. And by the way, if you are interested in doing some comparison shopping of your own, or maybe just want to buy one of these devices for yourself, I'll have links to where you can get these phones at their cheapest current prices down below in the video description. So check down there so you don't miss out. In regards to their design, while both of these phones are from the same A series line, there are a number of things that are different here. For one, you're dealing with two phones here that are very obviously pretty different in size, and they're likely going to appeal to different people. The A01 is a very small phone by 2020 standards at just 5.7 inches, while the A11 comes in at 6.4 inches, which is pretty on par with most other devices. In the hand, the A01 is obviously going to be much more comfortable and easier to use one-handed. For folks hoping to find a small phone in general, this is likely one of the few options out there. With the A11, I wouldn't call it too big to handle, but I know it's not the right size for everyone. I personally can still use it comfortably, but I know a lot of other people still want a small form factor, both to handle and use and to keep in a pocket or bag. Taking a look around at everything else, their form factors are pretty close. Both phones have a similar all-plastic build and housing, but the feel and finish differ slightly. The A01 has a matte finish, while the A11 is all glossy, and that's personally what I prefer. Either way though, I think plastic aside, the build quality is still pretty solid. As inexpensive as these phones are, they don't feel cheap, which is important, though just keep in mind that paying more for the A11 doesn't net you anything better. On the left side, the A11 has just its SIM and SD card tray, while the A01 has its volume buttons. On the right is where you'll find all the buttons on the A11, while the A01 has its SIM and SD tray, along with a power button. Up top, both phones have a headphone jack, which is great to see. And down below, the A11 has a USB-C charging port and its single external speaker, while the A01 charges via a micro USB port, so a little dated there. And this phone's external speaker is actually located around back. Also across the back, you'll see a dual lens camera on the A01, while the A11 has 3 lenses, and I'll get into that in just a minute. And the A11 also has a fingerprint reader, while the A01 does not. So a couple of important things to mention here with this. The fingerprint sensor on the A11 is super convenient. It's the regular old fingerprint sensor that's been around for a while, and I was surprised to see that the A01 didn't get one at all. Fortunately though, the A01 does have face unlock at least. The A11 has an option too, and they're both basically the same speed. The A11 might be a tiny bit faster from time to time. Honestly though, it's just nice having one more option on the A11 with the actual fingerprint sensor. In regards to the speakers, the thing I want to point out here is the weird placement on the A01. It leads to sound being distorted when the phone is flat on a surface. Besides that, I actually do think both phones sound the same, which might seem surprising. They're both just regular old single speakers after all, no no stereo sound or anything like that. Like I said, the only thing to consider is just the strange placement with the A01. When it comes to the displays, obviously these phones have a number of differences. Beyond their size, which we already talked about, the designs are also different. The A11 gets sort of a refreshed look with an Infinity O camera cutout in the top left corner. With the A01, this phone has the V-shaped notch that Samsung calls it, which is a little bigger than the teardrop setup. Now, realistically, this is just going to be a matter of personal preference. There's no advantage going with either phone. I think what's important to note is that both phones have some decent borders all the way around, with those sizable ones across the bottom there. So unlike a premium or mid-range phone even, you don't get the maximum screen-to-body ratio. But I still think both devices look pretty good by 2020 standards for the price, though the A11 probably has the advantage here. Interestingly enough, while the screen sizes vary significantly, much of the other screen's elements are pretty comparable. Both phones offer a TFT display, basically just LCD, and they are actually basically the same 720p resolution. The smaller A01 is a 1520 by 720 resolution, while the larger A11 is a 1560 by 720 resolution. And if you're quick with the math, you might notice that the A01 actually has a significantly higher pixel density since its display is smaller with the same resolution. It's 301 pixels per inch versus just 268 on the A11. Now, while yes, you can pick out the pixels from the screens on both phones anyway, the big difference in pixel density means the A01 looks sharper, especially when reading text or looking at anything small or up close. With this though, I don't know that a ton of people will notice necessarily, and it's probably just going to come down to whether or not you want a big screen to view content on or a smaller screen. Everything else about the displays is pretty much the same. They're LCD, so they aren't the brightest or most colorful, but still pretty good, honestly. Viewing angles are decent, all things considered, and most people here with these phones are going to be happy with what you get. And just keep in mind, these phones aren't for those of us who've enjoyed a flagship OLED panel anyway. My only gripe is just the fact that we didn't get 1080 resolution on the larger, more expensive A11. Inside, these phones are powered by different battery capacities, though the real-world difference in longevity isn't too noticeable. The A01 has the smaller 3000 mAh capacity battery, while the A11 is larger at 4000. But the A11 also has a bigger display and slightly more powerful specs as well, so it technically requires more juice to keep everything going. Both of these phones can last more than a day under normal usage, and as far as I've been able to tell so far, neither phone has any sort of advantage here with the battery life. The only thing you need to consider, like I mentioned earlier, is just the fact that the A01 connects via the older micro USB port, while the A11 gets USB-C. Both phones just support the 15-watt fast charging standard, and neither phone has wireless charging either, so it's really that connector type that's the main difference. In regards to their specs, we've got some differences here too. The A01 packs the Snapdragon 439 chipset, Adreno 505 GPU, and 2 GB of RAM. You can choose either 16 or 32 GB of built-in storage, though like I said already, you do have an SD card slot. The A11, on the other hand, has the Snapdragon 450 processor, the Adreno 506 GPU, and a choice of either 2 or 3 gigs of RAM. There's 32 gigs of built-in storage here and an SD card slot as well. Now, on paper, the A11 does have the better specs, but in practice, the difference isn't always clear. And in fact, when launching some apps for the first time, the A01 actually feels a little snappier. Both phones run Android 10 and One UI 2 out of the box, which is great, and I think that makes these phones feel well optimized. The most surprising thing for me really is just the fact that from a performance standpoint, the A11 is just not significantly better than the A01. It pulls ahead really only in just 2 categories. With gaming, the A11 is going to load faster and be a little smoother, especially if you get that extra gig of RAM option. And when you start to load more apps over time with things running in the background, the A01 seems to slow down more, while the A11 keeps up a bit for longer. The A11 is the better phone, but the difference is marginal at best. And like I said, I was personally surprised by that. I was expecting more for the price on the A11 or maybe less for the price on the A01. And seeing this side by side sort of makes me want to get a device like the A31 where the difference is more noticeable. Finally, in regards to the cameras, once again, we've got some things to mention. Obviously, the A01 has a dual camera setup, while the A11 packs 3 lenses around back. The A01 has a 13 megapixel f2.2 aperture main lens and a 3 megapixel depth sensor, while the A11 offers a 13 megapixel f1.8 main lens, extra 5 megapixel ultra wide lens, and the same 2 megapixel depth sensor. Now, in this case, I actually do think the difference in picture and video samples favors the A11 significantly. Everything looks sharper and brighter, and the phone just does a better job overall. You also get that wide angle lens, which is handy, but everything else with the camera software and features is the same here. 1080p video, live focus, a couple extra shooting modes, and up front, it's a similar story. The A11 gets the better 8 megapixel selfie camera, while the lens on the A01 is a 5 megapixel shooter. If pictures and videos are your thing, you should just go with the A11 for sure, but keep in mind they both are still budget phones after all, and you kind of have to keep your expectations in check with the results you'll end up getting. So here are my final thoughts. I think both of these phones are interesting budget options in a world of $1,000 plus devices. The A01 is a compact phone that I know is enticing to a lot of folks who just need something small, cheap, and easy. The A11, on the other hand, is a big, cheap phone that does a nice job all around. But actually, for the price, I think the A01 is the better deal. It's half the cost, and you don't really lose out on much. In fact, you may even like the smaller size after all anyway. I think if you're looking to spend $170 or $180 on the A11, it would be more worth it if you jumped up to the A21 or the A31 instead. But if you want to spend as little money as possible, or prefer a small phone, or maybe just need something simple, the A01 is easily the best option. So there you go, that's everything you need to know about the A11 and the A01. What do you guys think? Which phone would you prefer? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to know your thoughts, of course. Also, be sure to follow TechDaily on Twitter and subscribe to the TechDaily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.